What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC podcast. I'm your host, Brandon. If you're new tuning in, thank you for joining. This is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast, where we talk all things mental performance in sports. We have an awesome episode for you this week. We have on special guest Dr. JoAnne Bullard. She's a sport and performance psychologist that works with athletes ranging from the youth level all the way up to the professional level. In this episode, we go through her journey in sport, how she came to the position that she is today. We go through the state of youth sports today. We go through how she's able to coach both youth athletes and professional athletes. We go through her specific journey on what made her decide to get into sport and performance psychology. We discuss why it's important to find your why as an athlete and how this drives you every single day. We go over why it's important to have interests and passions outside of your sport and how that actually helps you with your performance in your sport. We go over the importance of staying present and being where your feet are at. We discuss training your mind and why it's important to continue to do that throughout the off season and not just try to implement that in season. And we review how to develop a growth mindset and ultimately try to maximize your performance to become an elite performer. This was a great episode filled with a bunch of education and tips, so I hope you guys enjoy. JoAnne, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to chat with Matt and I. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure. We're really excited to get you on here and talk all things mental performance in sports. So we're really excited. I know before we started recording, we already chatted about a few topics that I know are going to come up in this podcast. So I'm really excited to get into it. So just like we start every podcast, I'll put the ball back in your court and I'll let you kind of go through your journey on how you got to where you are today.
Awesome. Thank you. So my journey was not linear. It was not a straight journey. I always played sports. Sports was always, they were a huge component of my life, big part of my identity. I knew I wanted to play sports in college. That was something I was always working towards. And I played field hockey at Ursinus College. While I was there, my bachelor's was exercise sports science. My minors were psychology and coaching, right? So still staying within that athletic space. And my goals were to become a strength and conditioning coach. So when I graduated, I completed my CSCS, was certified, and my first real-time job was at Stockton College. Now it's Stockton University, but while I was there, it was Stockton College. And I was the fitness program coordinator and also provided strength and conditioning programs for athletes. I loved it. It was awesome. Just remaining in that college athletic space, it felt like home. And I was pursuing my master's at the time in sports science, completed my master's, started adjuncting on the side at Atlantic Cape Community College. Enjoyed being in the classroom. Never thought I would want to be in the classroom, but it was a different space, a different environment. As I continued working with the college athletes, I recognized a huge piece of the puzzle was the mental side. And being a former athlete, I always was connected to psychology, but I never truly, as silly as this sounds, recognized the connection of both of them and how beneficial it would be to train your brain proactively. So when I was pursuing my doctorate degree, I knew that's what I wanted to go into, sport and performance psychology. So after I completed my doctorate, I decided my life was changing, got married, had my first child, and thought, am I ready to pivot? Am I ready to try something different? So I did. And I've been now at Rowan University. I'm entering my 12th year teaching. I'm an associate professor in health and exercise science. I coordinate our sports psychology minor and certificate programs, and I get to work with college athletes again. So that was my journey in that trajectory. My personal business is Absolute Fitness Performance Psychology, where I work with youth athletes through professional athletes, helping them unlock that mental potential. And I'm able to do that with my, not only my CSCS, but also I'm a certified mental performance consultant through the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. And I'm also listed on the US OPC Mental Performance Directory. So I feel like this is a field that's always evolving, always changing, and it's
Hmm.
my job to keep evolving and keep changing and learning more and working with different populations and just growing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I appreciate you kind of going through each sector of your life, kind of that brought you to this moment now, and kind of running your own business and now teaching. Now, let's bring it back to your time at Ursinus, right? So you mentioned that you played a collegiate sport, right? And then transitioning from that collegiate sport into a different profession, right? And kind of not playing that sport anymore, right? I know we've had a lot of athletes that have transitioned from their sports world into a new profession, whatever it is, even if they're still in sports, right? Like you were still able to work in sport. What did that identity transition look like for you? Because I know a lot of people, it was much different. Matt and I have talked about this plenty of times on the podcast. Like Matt's a collegiate coach, and transitioning from player to coach for the both of us was a little bit more challenging, I'd say, at first, and took a
Sure.
little bit of an adjustment period. What did
Sure.
that look like for you transitioning from an athlete into a coach?
Yeah. So, I mean, athlete transition is huge. And I feel being a professional now, I have a better understanding of it. While I
Right.
was going through it, I did
Yeah.
not. So I remember just like coming out of being a college athlete and being able to go to the gym on my own and be like, what do I do? Like,
Yeah.
what program do I follow? What's my plan right now? And realizing I needed structure. There were a lot of things that sports taught me that is something still well out of my playing days that I still make sure to incorporate, that discipline, that structure that we need, different programming, sort of having a purpose for what you're doing and staying goal oriented. And that's something I know when working with athletes, that's a humongous piece of the puzzle. Not many athletes are aware of this transition. They know it happens, when we have the natural breaks in time, but what about those athletes when they aren't expecting a transition to occur? An injury, an illness, COVID, right? When that happened, how do you prepare for the unknown? And that's hard, So I found on my end professionally a lot of education, a lot of meeting them where they are, and also starting early, like talking about life after sport
Yeah.
before we even get to that part.
Yeah.
That's something that the conversation may sound weird, to a sophomore, but it's important for them to be thinking about what are my interests outside of sport? Are there any interests outside of sport, and
Yeah.
helping them pave that path.
Yeah, I'd love to dive deeper into that statement right there, right? Like you said, finding your interest outside of sport. Because I think, Matt and I, when we played in college, were in this very old school mindset of like, if we're not focusing on baseball, then you're not doing it right. Like
Yeah, yeah.
everything in your life had to be focused on this one goal. I'd love to hear kind of some of the benefits from your side, looking from the outside in, saying, well, actually, it will help you in your sport if you actually have other interests and other things that you're interested in outside of just Brandon, the baseball player, Matt, the baseball player.
Yeah, sure. So having other interests really help with that holistic person, the holistic being that you are. And many times we do stick with, I'm a baseball athlete, I'm a field hockey athlete, I'm a soccer athlete, and that's what I do. But there's so much value from being involved in other activities, other clubs, other organizations. And that's something I know when I work with college athletes. I'm always asking, like, hey, what else on campus are you interested in? And some of them have like a humongous list, and others are like, I don't know. Like I don't know what I'm interested in, right? And it may sound silly to think about, but it's the truth. So when we think about identity, it's really a dynamic um, sort of space because it doesn't correlate to performance outcomes. So you could have somebody who has a very low level of athletic identity, fits in all these other spaces, and excels awesome on the field or on the court. And you could have somebody, with a very high level of athletic identity doesn't really know what else they want to do and may struggle or may do awesome. So that's
Yeah.
that's a big piece. It's just learning who you are and what's important to you.
That's awesome. So, kind of athletic identity, is that something that, a lot of athletes, when they kind of come to you for that first time, is that something that they kind of struggle with? I'm definitely interested to kind of hear about, like, what are some common things that, maybe some like youth athletes, maybe some just like, high school, college, and then professional athletes that come to you. What are some of the things that they kind of struggle with for, or the real reason like why they're coming to you for that first time?
Yeah. I mean, it's all different, right? All unique,
Hmm.
but I'm trying to think off the top of my head very quickly, some examples. Injury has been huge. I've worked with a lot of athletes that the injury, concussions have kind of taken them away from continuing to play. That's hard, right? Because they weren't necessarily preparing for that to occur. Graduation, for our college
Yeah.
athletes, graduating and then deciding what's next. And a big piece there could be just walking into the unknown. I mean, that's for any college student too, but
Sure.
just what is that next step? What is it like? But when you think about college athletes, they have that built-in network of their teammates that they've had for those 4 years. So they're always used to being sort of in that space with others that now they're not, right? So that can be very hard not to have their people right off the bat. High school, I see the transition between I played through my senior year of high school, and I don't think I want to play in college, but I've dedicated all this time, my parents' money, missed parties, missed family events. Like, is this the right decision I'm making? And that's where it's like, hey, you can still play your sport. Maybe you don't want to play it at that collegiate level, but there's clubs, there's intramurals, like there's different ways you can still stay involved. And then our youth athletes. I mean, youth sports are different right now. We're specializing very early, and
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. But some youth athletes are deciding to make their transition earlier, right, and not continue when they've dedicated time since age 6 or age 7 to that
Right.
sport. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then what are so you talked a little bit about like taking that leap of faith and kind of changing like career path and everything. So it's almost like some of these people head into the unknown. Like you've already been there. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about like why you made the switch, what kind of went into making that change, and kind of how you made the most of it?
Sure. I think a lot of it was I was going into the unknown. Not knowing I
Yeah.
was going into the unknown. But I think just as as the life was changing for me, I recognized I also needed to change in a positive way, like what fits my life right now. Um, Again, when I was in college, I never thought I would be teaching. I never thought I would be in that space, and this is where I've been, and I love it, right? So keeping that open mind, it's something I always tell my students and athletes, like you truly never know. You never know what you're gonna like or not like. You may think this is the career for me, and then you do an internship and you're like, ooh, I don't think so, right? And you
Yeah.
find
Right.
something else. So for me, it wasn't always easy to make those decisions, but I had a lot of faith and trust in this this space of sports and space of sports psychology where I knew it was a piece of me that wasn't
Yeah.
going to leave, and
Yeah.
that's always been a grounding place for me.
Yeah. Was there a specific moment for you where you kind of, I guess, came to the realization about sports psychology where it was like, this is much more important in this space than I initially realized and something that I do want to pursue? Because I know, like, for the two of us, Matt and I, like running this podcast, I think in college there were moments where we were like, the mental side of the game is really important, but like that's, we'll cross that bridge when we get there type of thing. Like, was there a moment for you where you were like, you know what, this is actually something that I'm really passionate about and I know I want to pursue it? Was there like
Yeah.
a specific moment?
I think it was being in the space of being a strength coach and
Yeah.
actually working with athletes, not being an athlete, but working with athletes and just seeing it from the outside in and the struggles or just catching their sidebar conversations and but they were talking about, I mean, things, even just like sleep, you know, like not being able to sleep, can't stay on track with their time management and the course load. And oh, we have traveling and all these demands that are placed on them as a student athlete. So I have always been connected to psychology. I've always enjoyed reading the books, you know, and doing the things,
Yeah.
but I'm with you. I was more reactionary. And I didn't even know, truthfully, the value of it. And I only thought it could be applied in that something happened, let's try to fix it. And that's the first thing I usually preach to new athletes is yes, we can do that, but just like you spend all this time with prehabilitative exercises and stretching and nutrition and training and all this stuff for your physical performance. If you did that with your mental performance too and worked it proactively, man, like that's the whole package.
Yeah. No, I'd love to jump into that even deeper because Matt and I have actually had that exact same conversation with specific athletes where, you've brought up the mental side of the game and you have conversations with athletes about, incorporating different practices now when you're not in season. And they're like, oh, I'll start that in season. But it's the same thing like the weight room, like as Matt and I in the baseball sense, like you're not going to hop in the cage the day before your first game in the spring, right? It's like you have to practice a lot of those skills beforehand. I'd love to hear, like from your lens, the importance of kind of practicing those things in the off season. So then when you come in season, it's kind of second nature and muscle memory.
Sure. Um, it's parallel. So when we think about strength and conditioning, when we think about that term periodization,
Yeah.
right? Volume, load, intensity, it does actually follow the same principles. So the off season is where the bulk of your mental skills training should be. That's where you need to, I mean, you're investing in yourself with, higher loads and everything in the off season, and you go into maintenance during the in season. And we do the same thing on the mental side. So you're correct, right? It's like, oh, well, I'll do it the day before and see what happens. But that's how most are. And those are
Right.
some misconceptions. You know, a lot of athletes think it's too much time. Like I'm already doing all these other things. How do you expect me to add one more thing on my plate? The truth is 15 minutes, a couple times a week. It doesn't have to be hour sessions. Um, you figure out what works, what doesn't work, and that's how you make your model, of your
Yeah.
psychological skills training. But yeah, I mean, the off season is the prime time to really be working on things because your competition level is low. I don't want to say you have more time because we know
Right.
athletes are busy, but
Yeah.
you don't have that pressure of competition where there's a lot more weighing on you on a daily basis too.
Yeah. I'd I'd love if you could give us maybe a little sneak peek into what something you might recommend programming for, like a mental performance exercise for someone in their off season, or any sort of tools that someone can implement in order to kind of build those skills heading into the season, kind of building that momentum. So when the season comes around, right, like you said, they're able to maintain and be
Yeah.
consistent with it.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, every athlete is unique, so they'll all
Yes.
have different angles or needs. But generally speaking, the way I work with athletes is when they come off their season, that's the perfect time, like give them some time to decompress, but that's their perfect time to do some deep self-reflection.
Yes.
Like what were the things that went really well? What am I proud of about this season? What were my wins? What were things that were challenging for me? Where did I make errors? What were my setbacks? What were those challenges? And identifying them. And then really coming up with a strong, like, goal setting plan of action. And when we think about goal setting, it's not just those outcome goals that every athlete wants to set, which are important, but it's really thinking about what's the process going to look like? What are those short-term goals? What are the daily action steps you're going to be working towards? And when you have everything kind of laid out nicely in that sort of goal setting framework, it's almost like you're climbing the staircase. You have that outcome goal that you want to be achieving at the end of next season, but you can be focusing more in on, okay, but if one of my goals is, I don't know, working on sleep hygiene, and I want to be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, this is how I'm going to do it. Right. So you're building the habits, you're building the routines, and you're climbing that staircase closer and closer to those outcome goals.
That's great. So I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, like something was a misconception, right? And so I feel like psychology, sports psychology as a whole, there are a lot of like misconceptions from the outside looking in from, athletes that might have never done it, or parents that might be hesitant to, have their young athlete kind of go into like a sports psychologist or a sports psychology program. Can you kind of give us, I guess, a general idea of, and if this is just too bland, just let me know, like just sports psychology in general, but also some misconceptions that you've kind of heard, and then, if you quickly want to kind of like debunk those a little bit to kind of give some encouragement to the
Sure.
people.
Yeah. I mean, I said one of the misconceptions earlier, it just takes too much time. So that's something that is hard because you don't really know what everyone else is doing in their time blocks and throughout their day, but it doesn't have to take as long as some athletes may think. Another one is if I'm working with somebody in this field, there must be a problem. Or if coach finds out, what are they going to think? Or, you know, it's more of like a shame response, like I'm here talking to somebody about what I've done wrong, when in actuality you haven't done anything wrong, right? We're working on just helping you become more self-aware so you can self-regulate. I've seen a lot where the parents are really gung-ho and excited and want their child to be working with someone in the field, and the child is like, no, like not doing it, right? Because maybe they don't have an understanding about what this field truly is and how it can really be an asset. So that's something I see a lot, especially with some athletes that are coming to me, so I work with parents on how to have those conversations with their child about what this really is and what it entails, and how it's athlete driven. It's all for them to kind of go through that self-discovery process. Some other myths or things that could get caught up might be that's only for elite athletes. Only the top notch can receive these services, and that's not true at all, right? There's providers for just about every population and every age, which is really great. Yeah, so I think those are the most common ones I see in here.
Thank you. That's awesome. So,
Yeah.
and then you also have the elite mindset. You said elite, so that kind of got me going on the Can you kind of like let us know like what that is, kind of what went into it, and how it helps like your clientele?
The elite mindset program, or
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
having the elite mindset.
Just a
So
yeah.
yeah. So, really kind of creating framework for athletes where, first of all, they may not know the true benefits of incorporating sports psychology practices, especially proactively. So, my framework is all about helping athletes become self aware. Because if they can start to become self aware, maybe it is, let's say, performance anxiety. And when there's high pressure moments, they start to break down. So we need to figure out, well, what are those triggers? What are causing that athlete to experience that? So helping them kind of work backwards, figure out those triggers, understand those stimuli or stressors, work on the self-awareness piece. Because when someone is self-aware, then we can begin to self-regulate in those moments. And that's where we want to apply the fun stuff, right? All the strategies and all the modalities, but it takes a little bit to get there. And sometimes athletes, they want that first off, like, I want the strategy, and maybe you can give them a couple here or there, but it
Yeah.
really is something where we don't want it to just be a Band-Aid fix. So when we think about that elite mindset in that program, it's really the premise of being a mindful athlete, working on understanding yourself, because at the end of the day, it's the athlete's journey, right? I'm here to guide, I'm here to help, I'm here to provide education, but the application and doing the figuring out, because it's not one size fits all. So figuring out what strategies work, what strategies aren't working, and you never know when you might go back and try that strategy 3 years down the road. So just kind of hopefully keeping an open mind, trying things, seeing what sticks, and also making it easy, making it sticky, something where that
Hmm.
athlete doesn't have to think too much. They're already thinking a lot in performance, but where they can just play their game, do what they love to do, and know that they have confidence in the fact that their brain, that the mental side is going to be there for them along the way.
Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
So obviously you brought up that you work with all athletes of all different skill sets and all different ages. You have the youth athletes and you have all the way through professional athletes. Now, obviously, you know, the overall, I guess, gist of what you're working on with the athlete is going to be different from athlete to athlete. Now, when we're talking about like the youth sports versus the professional sector, what I guess do those sessions look like that is similar to one another, and what looks different from one another? Because I'm sure you're going to, work with a 10-year-old much different than you would with a 22-year-old professional athlete.
Sure. That's a really great question. And it's actually something I've been asked a couple times. Um, honestly, they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
Pretty similar. It's the
Yeah.
the framework is the same. The way I maybe talk or the words I use, I'm not that cool to use certain slang or whatever, but but the verbiage for a 10-year-old will be very different than maybe someone that's in college, right? Um, Self-awareness is interesting because I've worked with some youth athletes that are pretty in tune with themselves, and it's
Yeah.
awesome. Like I
Yeah.
enjoy going to those sessions with some of those 10-year-olds. Not that I don't enjoy going to sessions with all my athletes, but
Right.
it's cool because they're leading in the session. They're talking about what happened in the gym or they're talking about what happened on the field. So truthfully, I think it is a lot of the same framework, meeting the athlete where they are. The biggest piece is trust. Some athletes will trust you right off the bat, which is awesome. Some athletes, it takes some time and learning, and that's kind of my job to create that safe space, that safe environment where they understand privacy and confidentiality are key, that I'm not breaching that. Like some of them, they want to know that, oh, you're not calling coach, you're not posting something on social media, like you are keeping this between us. So they may test that out a little bit, but it's really meeting them where they are in that moment and releasing the skills and talking about different strategies as they're ready. So it depends on what they're looking to achieve and accomplish in those sessions.
That's awesome. And I think, you mentioned the word trust, right? And I feel like from when you're coaching like a sport and everything, it's a lot not easier to gain trust, but I feel like it's a little bit more tangible in the sense that like if I'm working with like a hitter and all of a sudden he starts getting a little better like quality contact, the ball's going a little further. How do you on your end kind of build trust in those athletes that aren't necessarily willing to kind of give you trust right off the bat?
Sure. I mean, trust is trust I think is very, very important. I mean, even when you think about it with like doctors you go to or therapists you go to yourself or even friends, right? And family, like to build trust, all of us have certain elements we're looking for. So it's not universal, right? So it could be that they talk about their dog in a
Hmm.
session, and the next session you're like, "Hey, how's Snoopy doing?" Right? And I know that sounds silly, but they're like, "Oh, she was listening." Like, "Oh, she's really interested." And so little things along the way, I've learned to kind of just pick up on their nonverbals, on what they want to talk about, what we bring up once and maybe they don't want to talk about it, and we'll pivot and go a different direction. But it's I guess there's no secret sauce to building the trust, but it's just being as intentional as I can when speaking with them, um, letting them know I'm focused on them during that time. I'm not scrolling on my phone or doing something different or being distracted. I'm there for them in that moment. And when they're ready to trust, they'll be ready to trust. And for some, again, like you'll know everything in the first 5 minutes, right? And for others, it could take 5 sessions before they begin to be themselves. But that's a vulnerability piece that does take time, but it's an important pillar. It needs to be there.
Yeah. No, definitely. I definitely see that, on the other side of coaching as well, whether it's on the mental side or the physical side, right? There is that, I guess, time period where trust needs to be built in a certain sense, right? Because obviously, and from their perspective as well, like the athletes, you want to go to someone that has your best interest in their mind as well. So, like you said, when that could take one session, that could take 5 sessions. It depends on the person and kind of how willing they are to let you in. So no, I completely agree with that, and I've had a ton of those experiences myself as an athlete and as a coach. But before, you mentioned kind of the youth sports piece, and you and I both joked we could probably have a whole another episode just based on youth sports. But Matt and I used to coach in the youth sports sector. Obviously, grew up playing travel ball and going to tournaments every weekend and all that stuff. But I feel like it's only elevated more and more every year since we've been out of that, and even since we stopped coaching at the travel ball level. So I'd kind of love to hear from your perspective, because Matt and I were a little bit secluded to like the baseball world and the baseball sphere, but specialization is definitely a thing that gets pushed on kids very young nowadays. I'd love to hear kind of your perspective, what you're seeing in the field from that lens, as in like kids are getting pushed to, specialize in a certain sport. There's maybe a lot more pressure than there was when Matt and I were younger. Like, I'd love to hear kind of how the landscape has changed a little bit over the past couple of years.
Sure. Specialization is huge right now, and I think I mean, for every sport. I don't think it's just for one sport. I mean, we're seeing it earlier and earlier in age. It's almost like the town leagues that I'm sure a lot of us played in that we did outside of school, and that was kind of it. And maybe you had a travel thing. Now it's almost like we still have the rec and the town leagues, but if you want to be good, you got to play on these other teams. And truthfully, I mean, I have children going through that travel sports sector, and yeah, I mean, competition is different. They are excelling, but my husband and I feel that they should be well-rounded. So we do encourage them to stick to multiple sports a year until they're ready to specialize. That's
Right.
our decision. I'm not saying it's the right decision,
Yeah.
but it is interesting to think. I mean, when we just think about movement patterns and the way our bodies work, I mean, overuse, especially your sport of baseball, right?
Big time.
You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to even think about just a couple aspects, which could be mental exhaustion and burnout, right, at younger ages, quitting the sport earlier in age because maybe they're just not having fun. They've lost that sense of joy, lost the connectedness with the sport. It's not something they are looking forward to in the same lens as maybe when they first started out. Injury could be a higher magnitude, and I know there's some research out there that we do see higher injury rates based on certain positions, certain sports. Again, it's not for speaking for everyone collectively, but it's important to be aware of it. So, just with the way their bodies are changing at those ages, I mean, growth,
Yeah.
puberty, I mean, all the things that are happening that it's a lot for them. Plus, what I found is they don't necessarily know how to take care of their bodies, like how to tell if they're thirsty or not. As
Yep.
crazy as that sounds, but like how to fuel themselves. I mean, some of these tournaments, you're having three games in
Yeah.
one day and they're back to back to back, and it's fun and exciting, but they're not eating, or they're eating stuff that isn't the best option, and they forget to drink. Oh, I don't need to fill up my water bottle. I'm good, right? And that's worrisome because they're doing a lot in a short amount of time, and they are young.
We want to take a quick second to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, New Jersey. Whether it's picking up a snack between games or picking up a party tray for the big game, the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton has you covered. For all of your pretzel needs, make sure you stop by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, located on North Maple Ave. Let them know that the ARC podcast sent you. Now back to the episode. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like a lot of times when we see things like that, right? I feel like a lot of parents could use a conversation with a sports psychologist over even the athlete, because I feel like there does become this, I don't know, thing where a parent's identity almost gets tied to the success that their kid has during those tournaments or whatever it is. And I feel like a lot of that specialization comes from that aspect. Now, I'd love to hear, because obviously I told you I recently had a son, and I play baseball, and I look forward to coaching him in any capacity that I have the opportunity to as we go along this route. But I'd love to hear, I guess, from your perspective, if you're giving any coaches pieces of advice or any father who wants to coach their son or daughter in their sport a piece of advice. What are you kind of, I guess, guiding them through on like what are some of the most effective ways to be a good coach, but then also a good parent?
That's hard. I think that's
Yeah.
a hard thing because um I mean, it's hard. It's hard to navigate. And
Yeah.
also, I mean, you're a volunteer coach, right? You're not getting paid. You're
Right.
devoting your time. You have your staff that's doing the same exact thing. And there's always politics involved in everything, right? In youth sports too. But I think a biggest piece of advice I would give is to remember that your job really is to provide that healthy environment for all the kids on the team to grow and to learn, and most importantly, to have fun, right? To challenge themselves in different ways. And for some kids, it's great. Like maybe they don't get a lot of playing time on the field, but maybe they're learning to socialize, and be with other people. So that's a learning component. So, like, every athlete on the team has something that they're walking away from each season, and it could look different, also depending on the level, right? Right, younger athletes versus middle school versus high school, like what that might look like. But it's important to have good coaches out there, coaches that are educated, coaches that understand the game, understand safety protocol, and all those components that we need. It's hard though. It's competitive even just from the outside, So it might not be the coaches, but it could just be the people in the crowd, people who are watching the game that could be getting a little obnoxious or rowdy. And at the end of the day, it's the coach's job to protect their athletes and make sure that they are happy, safe, and learning.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the developmental piece of like having a coach that's making sure that you are growing, you are focused on creating a process that's most effective for you, right? Creating a safe environment. Now, you said something earlier that I think was really important, talking about the process versus outcomes, right? Where you said obviously outcomes do matter at the end of the day, but the focus should be on your process. And I think there's a big, I guess, movement that I've at least, seen on social media and a lot of people have talked about where it's like process, process, process. But I think it was important for you to note that at the end of the day, outcomes do matter because I do think there are a lot of athletes, even Matt and I played with that. Their process probably wasn't super great, but they would go out on the field and they'd perform every single time. Like we've played with guys that maybe have taken a nap 5 minutes before a game, woken up, and we're like, how is this guy ever going to play? And he goes up and he, hits a home run or does something great, right? Like everyone's obviously different. Now, when you're working with athletes, I'm sure there is a lot of that level of, I guess, jealousy in a sense, where it's like, I've worked hard, I've focused on my process, but this other person kind of has these outcomes that I wish I had. Now, how do you kind of construe that to an athlete where it's like, this is this holistic view that you described before, where we're creating the overall person. We're not just creating an athlete who's looking to achieve a certain thing. Like, how do you kind of go about explaining that? Because I know, growing up, there were plenty of times where it's like, I've done X, Y, and Z. I've worked hard. I've done this, and then it's like this other guy who just woke up, hit a home run, and did whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'd love to hear from your perspective how you like explain that situation.
Sure. I mean, what's that quote? Comparison is the thief of joy. Isn't that the
Right.
quote, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's natural. It's part of us as humans that we do compare ourselves to other. Jealousy is a normal thing that we feel and experience. And you're right. Like, okay, I put in all this work, and then someone else wakes up and hits that home run. Like, man,
Yeah.
how did that happen, right?
Right.
So that's where it's important to work with the athlete on having them understand what is the comparison about? Like, is it jealousy? Is it something deeper? Or is it just like, I have been putting all this work and all this time, and I want to be achieving greatness. Like, I want to be achieving these goals, but I feel like I'm not getting the opportunity. Or is it just stay in your lane? Like, I work on this a lot with athletes, especially with endurance athletes. It's very easy to watch somebody else pass you, right? But focus on what's in front of you. Staying in the present moment, staying in your lane, kind of blurring out what's going on around you and focusing on whatever it is you're trying to achieve in the moment. Comparison can also help in a competitive way, right? So most athletes are competitive. So if it's a healthy competition, right, that could be something that could actually motivate them. If it's collaborative, right? So if it's something where they're working to boost each other up, that can also be healthy. And even when we see athletes, that recognize the stronger athletes on their team, like the athletes on their team that maybe are, hitting those homers or whatever it might be, and they pair up with them. They try to compete against them during practice or whatever it might be, or if it's basketball and they do one-on-one drills with them or something like that. That's only going to make them better, right? So it can also be recognizing what does that other athlete have that I want, right? That I want to be
Right, right, right.
accomplishing, and how do I get it? So there's always the two options, right? You can either complain about it or you can work on it and figure out, well, then how do I get to that level? And it could be healthy competition too.
Right. I think Matt and I have also talked about this before. Like, we've used I guess, the phrase where that level of competition can kind of light a fire under your ass a little bit in certain circumstances when you need it. Like, or it could be a coach maybe that you feel like is doubting you a little bit. And you kind of use that as like, you know what? Like, this kind of lights a fire under you. I'd love kind of a discussion about, like, so there's that moment where you might have that where there is that competition due to jealousy, or you think you're being doubted and it's like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. But at the end of the day, that might fuel the fire, but how the fire needs to come from within you, and it needs to be something that you actually want to pursue, not just kind of competing in a sport in order to, I'm going to beat you and that's why I want to do this, or I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, I'd love to hear that kind of like dichotomy of, shifting from the fire that lit you into like, what is actually the thing that drives me, and why do I want to play this sport?
Yeah. And I think you just said it, Brandon. It's what's your why? What's
Yeah.
your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? And I know when I work with athletes a lot with goal setting, that's the first thing we do. We establish what their why is, what's their
Yeah.
why statement. And some
Yeah.
athletes are like, bam, like this is it. And others are like, I don't know, because I've never actually thought about that. And that's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
right? But when
Yeah.
you have your why, I mean, that's what grounds us. That's what kind of is that like guiding light that we need at certain points of time. It can help us make decisions. It helps us understand. I mean, think about the sacrifices athletes make. It helps us understand why we're willing to make certain sacrifices and maybe not willing to make other sacrifices, sort of aligning ourselves properly. So that's something when you think about what's within you, um, that's personal, right? That's something that's going to help you navigate those hard times if you're aware of it and if you're in tune with it. Another cool thing is when you have your why, if you're working with a team or if you're a coach of a team, even working with the team to have the teammates share their whys with each other. And that can be a really like eye-opening experience for everyone because sometimes someone's why may not have anything to do with what you thought it would, but you're like, oh wow, like I just saw another layer of Matt. Like that's really cool. So then you can also help motivate each other at different points in time too.
What's a piece of advice that you might give to someone that wants to be in your position one day, right? Like someone that might want to get into strength and conditioning, or someone that might want to get into like sports psychology. What's a piece of advice that would almost, I guess nothing's ever easy, but what would make that a little bit of an easier transition for them?
Get involved early. Like when you feel that desire, when you feel that, I would say like when you feel that burning starting, like it's there for a reason, whatever path it is that's leading you that way. But if you can't stop thinking about it, right? If it is something that you're like, yeah, I'm really interested in, you're starting to research things and look at programs or look at certifications, that means you're wanting to veer that path. So connecting. I mean, in my field personally, sports psychology, it's a very friendly field, I found. People are very welcoming. Networking is nice. People want to network. There's a lot of great mentors out there. So going to conferences or going to a webinar or a meet and greet or something of that nature and just seeing what it's about, learning about everything that you could get involved in, because it's also a humongous field.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I work with athletes, but a lot of people that have the same credentials as me work with performing artists. They work with Cirque du Soleil style performers. They work with musicians. They work with military and tactile populations. I mean, there's so many options and pathways that you can take. So it's sort of like when you feel that part of you starting to turn, lean into it. And it could be scary to lean into something, but that's when you grow, when you kind of move that direction.
Yeah. I think it's funny that you bring up this like passion aspect and this fire starting to burn because, when obviously, I was doing my research about you and making some notes about the interview and getting ready for this, I also noticed that you do have a passion for running and specifically at marathons, half marathons. I know you've written a blog about that and kind of discussed your passion for that. I'd love to hear about, I guess, finding that passion post playing and why that was important for you and how that could be important for like other athletes that might find another outlet where they can express themselves.
So this is kind of funny because I did not bring that up when we were talking about athlete transition and what I did afterwards.
Yeah.
I started running marathons.
Yeah.
when I graduated college, I mean, gosh, maybe we ran 3 to 5 miles in field hockey. I mean, nothing crazy.
Right.
I've never run more than that. And I was kind of lonely. Like, it was sort of like, what do I do now? I moved back home, was away from my teammates, was away from people. I lived further away from college, so I wasn't, I was just kind of on my own for a little bit. And there was a program, it still exists, called Team in Training for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I was like, this sounds cool. What is this about? So I went to a session at a library near me, and it was a program where you train for a marathon, you fundraise for the society, but you get put together with a group, with a team. And that's who you meet up with on Saturday mornings. I think we met at the Atlantic City Boardwalk or the Ocean City Boardwalk, and you did your long runs together. And there were people just from all over. You had coaches, so more experienced runners. And I completed my first marathon, which is the Marine Corps Marathon, which was awesome. And this is actually pretty cool. I think I wouldn't continue, which I never thought I would say. So that was I was finding a team environment in a place that I guess I thought running was a little bit more isolating, kind of by yourself. But it was really cool to just be with people again and have that coach athlete environment and push myself to do something that wasn't typical for me to push myself to do. Yeah.
No, that's great. And I feel like athletes being able to find that thing post playing career that they still can be passionate about and does give them that drive to continue to push themselves and strive towards something. Because I think a big thing for myself, at least with, let's say, the gym at first, the biggest, I guess, hurdle to jump in a sense was you go from training in order to become a better athlete in the sport that you're playing, and then you start training just because, I want to be healthy, I want to live longer, I want to, have a healthy lifestyle, I want to look, whatever it is, I want to look better. And I think that mental shift is so different that when there is something that you still can train for and still can, push yourself towards, and it's not just like, if I don't hit this bench today, it's not the end of the world because I can't do this. Like, I'm sure when you're training, it's like, I can't miss this run today because when I show up to the marathon, I want to perform my absolute best because I'm training towards something. So I do think that's really cool that you kind of found that outlet. And I think that's, a really important thing for athletes to have.
Yeah, thank you. And it doesn't have to be, your outlet doesn't have to be physical activity.
Right.
I think that's important to say. It can be anything you want. But for a lot of athletes, they do tend to reconnect in different shapes and forms with moving their body because that's comfortable. That's what they're used to.
Yeah, no, of course. I completely agree. I think now would be a perfect time. We have our last segment of the podcast, which is our Fast Five segment. So 5 semi-rapid fire questions, and then we can get started whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Question number 1. What part of your identity did sports help you discover?
My discipline and ability to work with others.
Okay, great. Question number 2. Looking back, what moment for you felt like the end, but just ended up being a new beginning?
That's a very good question. I feel like this could be a very long just now.
Yeah.
Felt like the end, but could be a new beginning. Um, Gosh, maybe when I pivoted careers and I was like, "Ooh, am I making the right choice?" I knew I was making the right choice for my family, but was I making the right choice in general? And
Yeah,
then realizing it was the beginning of something really awesome.
that's great. Uh, Question number 3. When everything around you is chaotic, what's one habit that brings you back to center?
Breathing,
Yeah,
breathing, and I use the quote, "Be present where your feet are grounded." So I'll just say to myself, "Where are your feet right now?" And I'm not perfect in it, and that's what I always tell my athletes, but it's
yeah,
really important. You got to anchor in.
yeah. No, that's great. That's definitely something I can also improve on. So I'll definitely, I like that to kind of have that thought like, remember where your feet are at right now. Like, where are you? So that's great. Number 4, what belief about yourself did you have to unlearn in order to grow as an athlete or now as a person?
Hmm. These are very good. What belief I have? I can't do everything on my own. I really need to collaborate, ask for help, um, and lean on people that I trust all the time
Yeah,
because that's how you get things done.
yeah. And then number 5, the last question. What does success feel like to you now, and how has that changed since you were an athlete?
Success for me right now is seeing the athletes that I work with, the students that I teach, even my own kids, when they accomplish something and you just see that smile or that sense of pride within
Yeah,
them. Like to me, I'm like, that's their success, but I'm like, that's awesome. That's really
yeah.
great. For myself as an athlete, I think it was when you didn't get yelled at. No, when when you just knew you were performing well. When I
Right.
knew I was a goalie, so it was like when I knew I did the best I could do and was proud of my performance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. No, that's great. But JoAnne, I really appreciate you coming on. We're very thankful that you came on and shared your journey and had some great conversations with us and provided some great insights on, everything mental performance in sports and everything in the youth sports sector. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share all this with us. And I'm sure everyone's going to have the same sentiment. So thank you again for coming on and spending time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Of course. Thank you.